On the computer. So good afternoon, everybody. What we're going to do today is we're going to finish lesson 12. And that's working with Camera Raw. So in this particular instance now, we're working with a portrait. And just to let you know that there are on lynda.com, and there are several different courses on retouching photographs, specifically for fashion or for weddings, all sorts of things. And many of them utilize Camera Raw quite extensively. There's also several textbooks or books, you don't have to be calling them textbooks, but books on Camera Raw as well. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take the image to the left and we're going to make it look like the image to the right. So it starts by me clicking here to make sure that I have the right image selected. And notice that I've already opened it up from Camera Raw. And so when I double click on the icon, it takes me back to Camera Raw. There we go. So now what I want to do is I'm going to make some basic adjustments to this. So to start with, since this particular image is much greener, bluer than our final, that will be the first thing to change, is change the temperature, the white balance of the image. So there's a variety of ways of doing that. And the way the book suggests, and it's not a bad way, is to select a little eyedropper here, which what you need to do is you need to find the widest area in the photograph. So that would probably be not the little highlight behind her hair, but somewhere in here in the, her dress. And that's not a bad start. Notice that it goes to 3,500 is the temperature. So I can change the tint maybe to 1. If I need to, I can warm this up even further to maybe 3650. Okay. Then they want us to do a few other things. So we're going to change the exposure, and it just minimally, we're going to, boost it. If you can really blow it all out if you want, but that's typically when you're doing this yourself, that's what you're going to want to do. You're just going to want to slide it to either extreme. And then, you'll discover that we just want minor change here. Just plus 0.3, make it a little bit lighter. In fact, I might make it a little bit light, a little bit lighter. The next thing we want to do is increase contrast because we've removed that. I particularly like photos with a lot of contrast. So we're going to come down to the next slider here and we're going to add plus 15. Okay. You'll notice that the range between lights and darks is considerably more now. Okay. And then the last thing is to add clarity to this. So I'm going to go ahead and move me over here. And then I'm going to add clarity. So just a little bit, between 8, 10, something like that. Okie doke. So much better from what we had before. And if you want to see what we had before, we can always cycle between before and after. A big difference. Okay. So let's go ahead and bring that back. We don't want that there. We want that there. Okay. So let's go ahead and I'm going to now bring this back into Photoshop. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Notice a dramatic change. It's a little bit lighter and brighter than the one on the right, which is the finished version. So maybe I do want to go back with her and I want to tone that back down a little bit. So I'm going to go back, since I'm trying to be consistent with that. Instead of exposure, 0.5 0.5, I will take it back down to 0.3. So I kind of stretched or overdid it a little bit. Okay. So that looks a little bit better. It's still, what they have done in theirs is that it's less saturated. I discovered that the other day. So if you want from the get-go, if you want it to match theirs a little bit better, what you would want to do is come back again. Let's go back over here again. And notice that if I take a little bit of the saturation out, like so, maybe -20, it also takes a lot of the color out of it. So now if I go back, let's see if it's more akin to theirs. And this is closer to what they have. Now, do they tell you to do that in the book? No, I just discovered that myself. That's why I like having a before and after, or the finished and the start up at the same time. So now what we want to do, leaving this is a smart object for the time being, we want to adjust levels a little bit. So what we do is we're going to go to adjustments, and we're going to go to levels. And the settings that they suggest for us is that we want to change the highlights here to, let's see, well, let's start with the mid-range. We're going to do the mid-range to 0.9. So that darkens it a little bit. Okay. And then we're going to reduce the highlights a little bit, and we're going to change that to, I'm looking here to combine 242 instead of 255. So we're doing this manually rather than doing auto. 242. There we go. So we're getting closer, and it's still, mine is a little bit brighter than hers. So we'll see how mine ends, and I can always go back and change it, or if I like this as a result, then keep it. Okie doke. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to retouch her a little bit. So that means if I zoom in here like so, I want to take the little diamond from her nose, and I'm going to take some of her other moles and remove those and that sort of thing. But if I try to do that now with a smart object, I can't do that. So even if I go ahead and I select this layer and I hit Command J to duplicate it, make sure that I don't screw up anything that I've done before, that I can always go back to my original camera raw image if I wish. And I try to use the spot healing brush tool. Notice that I get the little universal circle with a stripe through it. It won't work. So in order to be able to make changes to her, I have to rasterize this level or layer. So what I do is I go up to layer, and I go to smart objects, and then all the way down at the bottom, I select rasterize. Now this will overwrite or supersede, because it is on a layer above the smart object, anything that we have there. If I ever need to go back to the original smart object, I would have to probably turn this layer off and start again. So to remove some of these, I'm going to go ahead and use the spot healing brush, make it a little bit larger than what I want to fix, and start to remove some of her moles and that sort of thing. So let's remove the one from here. They leave the one mole, which is a significant mole right here on her left cheek. They also leave the one here on her neck. It's up to you, and it would be also, if you're doing this commercially, if you want to remove those things, or, the client may say, you know what, no, leave them in there, or no, I want my face to be perfect. So that's the next thing that you do. Okay. So after we've done that, we have a little bit more retouching to do. So we're going to change some other things. In addition to the healing, we're going to take and we're going to use over here to the left. This is right here. We have the dodge, the burn, and the sponge tool. We're going to start by using the sponge tool. The sponge tool allows you to increase the saturation of colors or desaturate. So for starters, one of the things that we want to do is we want to make her eyes a little bit bluer. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to increase the size of the brush a little bit. And I'm going to look at the top because this is where you will find that this is either a saturate or desaturate tool. And I will be using both. Now, you can leave the flow at a default 50%. And if that kind of goes overboard and it's a bit too much, then you can always hit Command Z to undo and go back and then, you know, work accordingly. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click in here and drag a little bit just to make it a little bit bluer. It's not, you know, a lot, just a little bit. Okay. So that's all I want to do, make her eyes just a little bit bluer, a little bit more saturated in color. The next thing that I want to do is in the sclera, I think that's what it's called, the white of her eye. I want to desaturate some of that to make it a little bit whiter. You don't want to go overboard with it. You don't want it white. So what I'll do is switch from saturate to desaturate. Again, if you need to, you can change the flow of this so that you don't go overboard. The book tells us, you know, to use various, I suggest that you try your own. And notice that as I move over it, it's making a little bit whiter, whiter. Okay. And when I'm happy with that, then I'm good to go. Okay. Now, next step. What I've done now is I've retouched her blemishes a little bit. I've enhanced her eyes a little bit. And now what I want to do is I want to work with the flesh tones a little bit. So make those a little bit nicer. Okay. I'm zooming out a little bit here. So to do that, what I need to do is I'm going to go to select. And what I want to do is I want to, what I want to select? I want to select, I want to select, let's see, why can't I see it? Let me make sure that I have the right layer selected. And I do. I want to go to select. I want to, I don't want to load selection. Maybe it's a little bit, it's not where I had it planned. I want to change, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I want to go to select and I want to go to color range is what I want. There we go. So it was there all along. I'm just not seeing clearly today. So we want to go to color range. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that it detects faces. We want to increase the fuzziness to about 10. And then I'm going to use, you can either use selection or image. Okay, I'm going to use selection. So you can see in the white areas, that's where it's going to focus on. And when I click like so, I can pretty much leave that. And now what I can do is we can make some minor adjustments here by, again, using curves this time. So I'm going to go to adjustments and I'm going to go to curves. And I want to switch from RGB to red. And I'm going to pull this down a little bit. Okay, just a little bit. Okay, to remove, again, some of the reddish tone from her. Now, if I exaggerate that, watch what happens. See how it's affecting it in various ways. I'm increasing the red tones if I move it up. I'm pushing the greens if I move it down. So I just want it very, very subtle. Just a little bit, not much at all, if at all, okay? So I am getting closer. So I'm done with that. We're good to go. The next thing that we want to do is I want to apply a surface blur to this. So what I want to do to this is I'm going to, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and no, I can do it to this layer. I would do it a little bit differently than the book. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this layer again, because this layer I should have named corrections. There we go. Okay. And again, if I turn this layer off, notice that her blemishes and those changes that I made come back. So what I would prefer to do is I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this layer again. So I'm going to hit Command J. Let's go. Command J to duplicate that so that I don't, work on top of this. And I'm going to go ahead and on this layer, I'm going to add a surface blur. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead up here and I'm going to go to filter and I'm going to go to blur. And it's down at the bottom of blur, or surface blur. Okay. And the settings that they want for this are, I'm just going to leave threshold should be 10 and radius should be 5 pixels. So I've already have this preset, or this is the default setting. Okay. So this should blur it a little bit. Let's turn this off and back on and see if we see much of a change. If I zoom way in here, let's see if we can see much of a change. And it's a very subtle blurring. It's taking her pores and it's softening them. Okay. So what we can do is we can take this layer and we can reduce it to 40%. Okay. And then what we can do is we can take the eraser tool, because I don't want to erase, or I don't want her eyes to be blurred. And I can remove those sections, and the same with maybe her mouth and that sort of thing. It's mostly the skin tones that I'm concerned about. So I'm going to take this new layer and I'm going to reduce the opacity of it to 40%, and that's something that you would have to play with yourself to see what you want. And again, if I take it all the way down to none, you can see how much more pronounced her pores are. So it's up to you and the client as to how much of her pores you want to erase. Typically, in movie posters with actors and actresses, they kind of go overboard a bit. You can make a middle-aged person look, someone in their 50s, make them look like they're in their 20s or 30s. But if you use overkill, then that might be something that you have to be careful of. There is one thing that I forgot to do. I want to highlight the area above or just below her brow just a little bit. So I'm going to turn off that new layer that I created, and I'm going to go back here. And the tool that I want to use for that, I forgot that. I'm going to use the dodge tool, and that lightens it. And I want to turn this down, the exposure to 10%. And then just very lightly, just kind of going across just a little bit to accentuate the highlight below her brow, but above her eye. So I apologize. That's something that I, forgot to do. And now what I can do is I can take, the eraser tool. So let's take the eraser tool. And again, I can work with the areas around her eyes. So we can take a brush size between maybe 10 and 50 pixels. And where am I at right now? I've got a big one. I have one that's 150. So I can take this down a little bit. So let's work with 50 pixels here. Close to it. Might be too small for me. That's fine. Okie doke. And now what I want to do is I want to set the opacity to 90%. So let's take the flow and the smoothing and the opacity. So I'm going to take this to 90%. And now what I want to do is I want to rework around her eyes a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead, and it may not look like I'm doing much. It's very subtle. If I zoom way in, you might be able to see the changes. But as I erase now around her eyes and around here, it will make sure that oh, you know what? I'm working on the wrong layer. Got to be careful. So let me look at history and let's see what I did here. Let's go back up to here, layer visibility. I need to work on the corrections copy here. So again, it's easy to get messed up when you're not paying attention. But now what I want to do is I want to take this layer and I'm going to go ahead and, because I'm going to bring out some of the highlights around her that we created underneath her brow. And I want to make sure that her eyes look nice and sharp. So I'm erasing that surface blur around the eyes. Could also probably erase them around her mouth as well. If you want to go around her dress, you know, if you want to go around parts of her hair, I don't know that that's necessary because that's really not the focus of our attention. And then we'll be good to go. Pretty close to that. Let me zoom out a little bit. I'm going to make the brush a lot bigger here. And I'm going to go ahead and sharpen up her dress a little bit so there's no surface blur here. So these are kind of, you know, for retouching a person and making all of us look a little bit better, I guess. These are some of the basic steps that you want to take. Now, mine is a little bit brighter than theirs, and I kind of like mine a little bit better, but it's up to you. You know, if you wanted to go back, we could, here's a suggestion. You know, if you do want to make changes to all of this, and you want to make sure that everything is left intact. So, you know, always think in terms of working non-destructively. What I can do is I can take the top layer, scroll down, hold down the Shift key, and also select the bottom layer as well. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Shift, Option, Command, E. And what I've done is I've taken and I flattened all of those, but leaving all the originals intact. So now if I wanted to make this a little bit darker, I could always bring up in another adjustment layer, and I could go to levels, or I could, go to curves. So let's go ahead and, try levels here. And let's go ahead and make this a little bit, that's, a little bit darker if we want. We can also change the midtones here a little bit. It's all, again, it's to your liking. And maybe just tweaking it a little bit gives us a better result. I think in mine, I like the colors because they're a little bit richer than the final version of theirs. But again, the changes are subtle, and that would be up to you. You could go back and we could, change saturation overall. You could do a variety of things and make it work a little bit differently. Okay, so that's the crux of this. I would not flatten the image as they suggest. What I would do if, because I like leaving all of my layers intact. If I did want to send the client a finished version of this, what I would do is I would duplicate the image. So let me go ahead and close the first one that we had here, which is, I'm not going to save that because that's the finished version that the book gives us. But what I could do instead is so that this would be my original that I would keep and save as a Photoshop file. And then what I could do is I could go to image and I could select duplicate. So this is the start copy. And now what I could do is I could go ahead and I could flatten it. So I could come over here and I could flatten the image. So I have a background image and I've removed the blemishes. I've enhanced the image overall. So I've taken some of that coloration out of it from the mode that was used when they took the original. That was highly kind of shifted towards the bluish or greenish side of the color spectrum. And now this could be the finished one that I hand the client or that I use to print. But remember, I have the original that has all of the layers left intact. Okay. I'm sorry, Jess, let me go ahead and allow you to chat again. Are you talking about how to get the, to duplicate it or to flatten it? Hold on here. Let me go to, there we go. So, yeah, Jess. Which was it, to flatten or to duplicate?
Yes, it was way back when you were dealing with the flesh tones.
Uh-huh.
And you were trying to just ease them up a little bit. I guess I'm not sure whether you were brightening them. I put that up some time ago. So, but what happened was you clicked on something, and it highlighted several different areas on her
So
body
to,
with like a diagonal with some diagonal lines.
okay, that was using the adjustment layer curves. And to get to that, this is what it is. So let me show you again. I'll turn this one off. And it's a very subtle change. So here's the corrections copy. And then what you do is you go to select and you want to select color range.
Right. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, make sure that you have detect faces selected. You want to increase the fuzziness of about 10. And I use the selection here. If you use the image, then you click in here and it creates the selection. I'm just using, I was just using this selection. So now we can come back in here. And I'm going to cancel this and I'm going to go back again and try that one more time because I like the original before. So select, and I want to use select color range. There we go. So the highlighted areas are going to be the ones light are going to be the ones that are selected. So now when I affect, if I go back here and I use the adjustment layer, and they suggested that we use curves, which is good. And when I select that, that selection doesn't go away, it's just hidden. But again, if I click on in the middle of the curves and I move it up, let me turn off this top layer. There, now you can really see the difference. Oh, see how it's affecting her?
Yes.
And I just wanted just a very subtle little change here. And that was all. Okie doke.
Okay, and okay, so you're just adjusting it here. And then how do you get that to stick? Do you just leave it, or do you save at this point, or
Wait, say again. Let me turn up my speaker here.
saving it, or are you just going to keep doing adjustments?
I would just keep doing adjustments because adjustment layers are non-destructive.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
It's when you do things that are destructive that I make copies of it first. That was why I chose it. You know, the book says, well, go ahead and flatten it and you're done. Yeah, I can do that. But then if I save this as my Photoshop file, I've lost all the work that I've done. So what I would prefer to do is duplicate it, flatten the duplicate, and then keep the other one with all the layers intact so that I can always go back to it and adjust if I need to, and I don't have to start from scratch.
So you're flattening the new duplicated layer that you're making.
Correct.
Okay,
The new
thanks.
duplicate image. Okie doke. So that's it for today, folks. I will have this recording up shortly for you to review if you wish. Next week, we're going to start watching a series of videos on retouching and restoring photographs. They are already saved and recorded on Canvas. They are taken from lynda.com. So if you have a lynda.com subscription that you got from the LA County Public Library, you can watch these again and again and again in their original form. And I recorded them, what I see here, but because I didn't want to infringe on their copyrights, because YouTube wouldn't allow me to publish them. So I put them on Canvas and they're available for you there. Okie doke. So I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to pause the recording and say goodbye. And I'll see everybody on Monday.